Our next reader, Dr. Doug Kiburz, one of our veterans of poetry. And welcome, Dr. Kiburz.
My name is Doug. I'm Connie Kiburz's husband. We've got a little manure farm ranch west of town. I ride some old-time bicycles. I do a little cowboy poetry, but my wife suggests I keep my day job as an orthopedic surgeon. Since we have a mature crowd, I can tell you that there were two fairly famous poet-writers walked into a bar. And they were arguing who was the best of the quick-witted and impromptu writers. A judge overheard them coming in, and he says, "I'll settle this. You both have 1 minute to make up a quick rhyme, but it has to end in Timbuktu." So they got to thinking, and after a minute the judge says, "Okay, Shakespeare, what's yours?" And he said, "I walked upon the desert sand. I thought it was the promised land. A caravan came into view, its destination, Timbuktu." He says, "Oh, Lord Byron, what's yours?" He said, "Well, Tim and I a-walking went, came upon three maidens camped in a tent. They were three and we were two, so I bucked one and Timbuktu." But I'm glad that the 1850s came up because, you know, Sedalia has a lot of history during the Civil War, the railroad, the rawhide times. And as a note, if you're looking for something to do, the Trails End is a committee that's bringing the 1850s and 60s back to Sedalia in a sculpture garden. We're having a town hall meeting at the Pettis-county courthouse at 7 o'clock Thursday night. And I can think of no better reason to be in a courtroom in a town hall meeting. But getting back to the old days is where we pick up on this little story. The dust had nearly settled on that day we'd all recall as the longest, darkest, forlorn time, like Rome about to fall. We had a 3-horse town with a livery, post, and bar. If you walked 2 blocks from any point, you'd surely gone too far. We knowed each folk inside and out, every tattoo and wart. I reckon all had shared some infamy within our little port. Every few years or so, a kid got some wild hair. He'd buck the local offings and seek out better fare. But most folks just carried on and found a way to settle in. We frowned on cousins dating, but the gene pool was mighty thin. Sure, you had your little cliques and castes among our little throng, and except for those with noses high, we mostly got along. We had our token characters, just show me a town that don't. Some towns air their peccadillos, but most clam up and won't. There were 2 drunk most of the time, but we tried to do what's right. We'd lock them up in jail to sleep to keep streets safe at night. There was a spinster and widow Jane and strange old farmer Vince. He got a mail order bride last spring and we ain't seen him since. I speak to set the picture as I explain more fully, to tell the tale of woe and the fate of our town bully. Jack was 5th generation born. As his folks came in by wagon, he thought himself so special, but he had no rights for bragging. His kin had all been farmers when crops and prices were still good, but they got behind in payments and borrowed more than they should. With 3 straight years of drought, then an early killing frost, the bank now owns his family place, as all that was is lost. So Jack, he had a mean streak, and he'd grump and groan and growl. He was trouble in the making, and he'd make a fair day foul. It was a hot and dirty afternoon as the local crowd flocked in. The one-stop bar was crowding up, and the mugs were filled again. Jack had just lost at pool, and his gal had cut him loose as he bellowed for a bottle of his favorite drowning juice. It wasn't if, but when old Jack would end up in a fight, and it wouldn't matter who or when or if they were wrong or right. Then, from somewhere out of nowhere, a stranger strode through the door. They were not just any jeans or boots that we'd ever seen before. This no-name man was scrawny, and he walked a tad bit strange. He was dust from hat to boot, and smelled right from riding range. He put one hand on the brassy rail and gestured for a brew. His gloves fit tight, his hat pulled low, he spit out a hunk of chew. With his slicker on his shoulder and his Stetson too low to see, he gave no indication of what brought us this mystery. The tension slowly mounted, and some started to perspire. It didn't take a wizard to guess what might transpire. Jack dropped his cards and shoved his chair and grumbled crass and low. We all knew what was coming, and we braced for quite a show. Jack threw a peanut shell that bounced off the stranger's boot, who stomped it with his spurred heel like he didn't give a hoot. Jack walked up to the stranger. His nerves were steamed and fried. He poked the fellow's shoulder and told him to step outside. The little man just shrugged, and on Jack's boots he kicked some dirt. Then he mustered up a tobacco wad and launched it on Jack's shirt. Old Jack looked at that plug of crud, and he could take no more. Took one step back, rolled up his sleeve, and Jack prepared for war. What happened next is a thing of lore. 30 tongues tell truth and lies. I reckon you'd have to be there to know what you yourself surmise. The elfish gent spun on his heel with such amazing grace and assumed a statued posture like an alien from space. Jack gave a hearty laugh and sent a roundhouse at the dude, but before he caught another breath, the place just came unglued. The stranger blocked Jack's attack and stepped into his space. Then he planted his boot's impression in the middle of Jack's face. His hands and feet wailed on Jack like the propellers on a plane. It was clear to all who witnessed, Jack would never look or walk the same. We heard bones snap, a nose that broke, and ribs explode like sticks. It was so fast and furious, and it was Jack took all the hits. It stopped as fast as it began, like a tree falls in the wood. Jack toppled in slow motion, having withstood all he could. There was no way of knowing if Jack was living or was dead, but no one moved to check him, so we took a drink instead. The stranger drained his glass and grabbed his Stetson by the brim. As long locks fell, our jaws just dropped. It was a her and not a him. She slapped down her mug and winked at the astonished crowd. She spoke in a whisper, but it seemed so foghorn loud. She said, I came to ride the West, to be happy and be free. But with slugs and thugs like Jack around, that wasn't meant to be. So I ramble over hill and dale, and I ride to the setting sun. When a bully needs a lesson learnt, I do what must be done. To make life a little easier for all that come along, I clean up the West from debris like Jack, who've heard my little song. I'm not a spoiled cowgirl, I'm on no vigilante spree. I ride my sorrel stallion, and the dirt balls come to me. So be a peach, my good man, and cut each gal some slack, 'cause if I hear you have it, I'll just might way back. And if I have to come again, you'll know you've had the curse. Old Jack was just the opening act. It could be so much worse. And then, in solemn silence, she started out the barroom door. She mounted up and tipped her hat, having settled one more score. Now heed this example, gents, before you fall from grace. If you're a rightly thinking man, this lesson you'll embrace. I can hardly walk into a pub without thinking about my old bricklaying friend Patty. A few of you may have heard it. But there was a story that went around in Ireland long ago about Paddy the bricklayer and how he couldn't show up for work, and most of you are thinking he spent too much time in the pub like you all are doing. But as it turned out, it became, as most stories go, it changed the name as it went here and there because it wasn't written down. Eventually it became a poem. Pat Cooks, he put a little song to it, and it became a song that the Dubliners, I would like to say, made famous, but since so few people have ever heard it, probably not so famous. But this is Paddy writing a note to his boss as to why he would not be at work that day on the job. So he's writing, Dear Sir, I write this note to you to tell you of me plight, and at the time of writing I am not a pretty sight. Me body is all black and blue, me face a deathly gray. I write this note to say why Patty's not at work today. Whilst working on the 14th floor, some bricks I had to clear. To throw them down from such a height, not a good idea. The foreman wasn't very pleased, he being an awkward sod. He said I had to cart them down the ladders in me hod. Well, clearing all these bricks by hand, it was so very slow. So I hoisted up a barrel and secured the rope below. But in me haste to do the job, I was too blind to see that the barrel full of building bricks was heavier than me. And so, when I untied the rope, the barrel fell like lead. Clinging tightly to the rope, I started up instead. I shot up like a rocket till to my dismay I found halfway up I met that bloody barrel coming down. The barrel broke me shoulder as to the ground it sped. And when I reached the top, I banged the pulley with me head, clinging tightly, numb with shock from this almighty blow. And the barrel spilled out half the bricks, 14 floors below. Well, when the bricks had fallen from the barrel to the floor, I then outweighed that barrel and so started down once more, clinging tightly to that rope, my body racked with pain. When halfway down, I met that bloody barrel once again. The force of this collision halfway up the office block left multiple contusions and a nasty state of shock. Still clinging tightly to that rope, I sped toward the ground and landed on the broken bricks, the barrel scattered round. Whee! I lay there moaning on the ground, I thought I'd seen the worst. But the barrel hit the pulley wheel, and then the bottom burst. A shower of bricks rained down on me, I hadn't got a hope. As I lay there bleeding on the ground, I let go the bloody rope. Well, the barrel then being heavier, it started down once more, and landed right across me as I lay upon the floor. It broke 3 ribs and my left arm, and I can only say that I hope you'll understand why Patty's not at work today.